Hey everyone, today I'm going to be sharing with you what's in my portrait photography camera bag. So this is the equipment I use for portrait sessions, couple shoots, weddings, commercial work, fashion photography, so shoots like e-commerce and editorials. I'm going to start off with my lenses first, then go through what camera bodies I use, and finally, I have a bunch of accessories to share with you, and there are some fun ones there I think you're going to like, especially if you're an on-location photographer like me. A big question I know a lot of you have is, what ecosystem do I use? I own a lot of different camera brands, and on YouTube I use every ecosystem to bring you reviews and comparisons, but for my work I am still shooting Sony. The reason for this is because I really enjoy the cameras they offer. There's a good mix of photo and video heavy cameras that are useful for my workflow. The files from Sony look great and are easy for me to work with for portraits. They've got some great lens options available, and the most important one for me is their autofocus system works really well for the style of portraits that I create, which involves shooting at wide apertures and using lots of movement when posing my clients. By the way, I did upload a video last year about what's in my travel photography camera bag. That video includes the gear I travel with to use for landscape and wildlife photography, and also vlogging and video, which is a big part of my travel work. So if you're interested in seeing that, then I'll leave it linked in the description. To get started, I have my favorite lens of my entire kit, and it should be no surprise to you, but it is the 35mm f1.4 GM. This is my most used lens, and even though it's a little unconventional for portraits, it can produce some really beautiful results. The reason I love using a 35mm so much is because it's a nice balance between having your subject be prominent in the frame while still being able to show off the location. Locations are a really important part of my photography process, so I love using wider focal length like a 35, which lets me incorporate that into my portraits. Next up is a new addition for me, and that is the 50mm f1.2 GM. Before this lens, I used the Zeiss 50mm f1.4, and I didn't feel the need to immediately move to the 51.2 GM when it first came out. I only purchased this lens halfway through last year, believe it or not. The reason for this is because I didn't reach for a 50mm often enough in my work to justify the upgrade. However, I actually fell back in love with the 50mm focal length last year and have found myself using it more and more. So here's the f1.2 version, which has finally found its way into my camera bag. Now I have the most recent addition to my kit, and this is the lens I was actually waiting for to be able to film this video for you, and I did purchase this one right away. It is the 85mm f1.4 GM2. Before this lens, I was using the original GM Mark I, and I do have a comparison video between these two lenses on my channel, which I'll leave linked down below for you if you want to see the similarities and differences. For me personally, I was really hoping for an 85mm f1.2 to be released, but since the GM2 is smaller and lighter and has slightly faster autofocus than the GM1, it was easy for me to swap over to this one instead. I love using an 85mm for more traditional portrait photography. Sometimes the distortion of a 35 is a little too much and not really needed for the style of photo shoot I'm doing, so this is where the 85mm comes in. It also, of course, is the most beautiful focal length for headshots. The final lens in my camera bag is yet another prime lens, so I don't have any zooms in my portrait kit compared to my travel bag, which is mostly zoom lenses. But the last lens I use for portraits is the 135mm f1.8 GM. Fun fact, this is the oldest piece of gear in my bag in terms of release dates. The 135 came out in 2019, and I've owned this for longer than anything else in my current bag, since I got this when I was an A7 III user. The 135mm has two main uses for me, and the first one is convenience. This is such a great focal length to use when you need extra reach. So when I'm shooting weddings, I like using this lens during the ceremony and speeches so I can stay out of the way of the guests while still being able to capture tight shots. It's also really handy to use when taking photos of people who are not super comfortable in front of the camera, since you can give them a lot of space compared to, say, a 35mm where you have to be physically close to them to capture good compositions. The second reason is this is the dreamiest lens. It's basically an even more dramatic version of an 85mm when capturing portraits. Moving on to camera bodies, I use not one, but two Sony a7 IVs. I get asked quite a lot if I'm going to move to the a7R5 or the A1 II, but the truth is I am very happy with the capabilities of the a7 IV, and they produce great quality images for my style of work. I don't personally need any more resolution than 33 megapixels. I find this is such a great all-rounder camera for portraits, fashion, and weddings, and at the same time, it has an extra purpose where I take it with me while traveling to do landscapes, wildlife photography, and sometimes vlogging as well. I don't typically crop my images that much either, so there's no need for me to take up more storage with larger resolution files. Basically, I find the a7 IV is in a sweet spot where its autofocus is good, it's great in low light, it produces good images, it's weather sealed, dependable, and most importantly, it comes at a good price. If you are looking for a camera body for yourself and you're after a similar style of work as me, but the a7 IV is out of your budget, you can also take a look at the a7 III. This is the camera body I used for a few years before the a7 IV came out, and it's yet again another really dependable body with a good set of features. The reason I have two cameras is when you're doing professional photography, it's always extremely important to have a backup with you of the equipment that's required to produce that work. For example, I don't want to arrive to a fashion shoot and my camera breaks halfway through and I have nothing else to use for the rest of the day. Another reason is I'll usually shoot with two cameras at the same time. So during a wedding, I'll have two bodies on my camera straps with two differing focal lengths. So on one camera, I'll have a wider angle like a 35mm, which means on my second body, I'll put on a telephoto like an 85 or 135. This means I can be on location shooting more rather than having to constantly change my lenses if I only used one body. Which brings us to accessories. This is the camera strap I use to be able to use two bodies throughout a photo shoot. These are called the Moneymakers from Holdfast Gear, and I've been using these exact straps for more than 10 years now, which is so crazy to think about, and they are definitely durable. I'll leave all the accessories I mentioned today in the description, by the way. So next I use ProGrade V90 SD cards and Angelbird CF Express Type A cards that I keep in this case, and these are also linked down below. Little fun fact, the ones that are upside down means they haven't been formatted yet. In terms of filters, I keep a few different ones in my camera bag at all times to use for when the occasion calls for it. My favorite one is this black Pro Mist filter. I have it in half strength, which is quite strong. However, that works really well with the GM lenses I use since they are very sharp with good contrast. So this way you can see the effect pretty nicely. I also have a circular polarizer, which I usually use when I'm shooting near water or glass. This filter will cut down on the reflections and glariness of these surfaces so you can actually see them in the photo properly. I also have ND filters. I have a couple of variables. This one here is a 1:5 ND and this one is a 6:9. While I do use these a lot more for video, these are handy to get those shutter drag style photos if it's super bright out. If you're an on-location photographer, you absolutely need one of these. I got this idea from Lydia, the makeup artist I always work with, but it's this silicone mat that I like to use to get my clients to sit on the ground without having to get their outfits dirty or wet if it's been raining. It opens up pretty large like this, so you can definitely fit a couple on it pretty easily, and you can also fold it up nice and small to fit it under one person. So I usually have it around this size when I've got it under one person. This thing is so great and I never ever go to a photo shoot without it. You can also use it to put your camera on if you don't want to set it on the ground, and you can cover your gear with it if it's raining. So there's lots of different uses for this little thing. Next, are you even a photographer in 2025 if you don't also run a social media page to support your business? Seriously though, these Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses have been so amazing to create content with, and I always have them in my bag. If you're not familiar, these are sunnies or glasses. I have them as glasses with a built-in camera, and you can take photo or record vertical video. So as a photographer, obviously your hands are full with your camera equipment, so these are such a good hands-free way to capture some behind the scenes content to post to your social media while being a little bit more fashionable than wearing a GoPro GoPro head mount, for example. Speaking of social media, my phone, I've got the iPhone 16 Pro Max. It has been an important part of my workflow as well. I use my phone also to capture behind the scenes footage by either putting it on a tripod or asking someone to film for me. For example, most of the photos in my end of year recap post I made on Instagram were taken with my phone. I also like to mix final photos with the behind the scenes footage in my carousel posts as well, as I feel like it gives a bit more of a realistic look into your photo shoots. I also keep a handheld LED light in my bag. I have quite a few of them, but I usually bring this one. These are great because they barely take up any space in my bag, but come in so handy when I need a bit of extra light on someone's face, especially in bad weather or indoors. They also make a really good backlight in dark indoor spaces too. Lastly, I'm going to fire off some bits and bobs I keep in my bag. I have a lens cloth, of course, and these are the camera batteries I use. I have a multi-tool, which is very handy. I also keep alcohol wipes and band-aids in my bag. These are very important. I also keep an AirTag and hair ties. So that is everything in my portrait photography camera bag. Let me know in the comments what's in your camera bag, because I'm interested to know how similar or different it is to mine. But that is all I have for today's video. As always, thank you so much for watching. I make new videos every single week, so I'll see you all next time. Bye.